I deem it a great honor to be called upon to introduce the second speaker, and he's in the person of Professor De-Valera, Botchway. Prof is currently the head of the History Department at University of Cape Coast, Ghana. He is a professor of history who focuses on the social and cultural history of African and diasporic African people. Prof is also an adjunct lecturer and supervisor in the Center for African and International Studies in the same university. He is also the patron and coordinator of African Students and Empowerment Group, a society of young scholars at the University of Cape Coast that is committed to the quest of an African renaissance and protection of tangible and intangible cultural heritage in Ghana and in Africa. Professor De-Valera Botchway has studied in prestigious universities, including the University of Cambridge, England. He has published several academic articles and has authored a number of books, of which one of them is part of the African Humanities series under the auspices of American Council of Learned Societies, New York. Colleagues, as we have gathered here to discuss education in Ghana and matters arising, we cannot bypass the venerable historian whose works in African history has gained him a high reputation as a passionate speaker in Ghana and the world over. It is my singular honor to invite our second speaker to take the podium. With a standing ovation and a round of applause, let's welcome Professor De-Valera Botchway.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind ovation. I'm happy. Greetings. And because I operate on a more horizontal, level of relationships, I would say that I respect all of you here without creating hierarchies. I would say that it's an honor to be before you, and I would like to say thank you to your president. I see him, even though he's wearing his face mask, I can make him out. Mr. Dogbe, and also to the able lady who is being strong in your movement, the vice president, I believe. Thank you for inviting me. And to all of you here, I say that you're doing a great job. Thank you also for being here, and thank you, Chair, for your presence. And to you, Father Gustav, I say thank you for your enlightening, lecture. It's an honor to honor one of your own. And it's important for us all to understand that which we do for our ancestors, our children, and those behind us will do for us. So it's important for us to honor our elders, especially when they transcend to the other side. And that's why I'm so happy that you've dedicated this lecture series to the memory and good works of one of our elders. Know that those who come after you will do same for you. So I heard the euphonics singing, and I was just thinking about the lyrics. One of the things that the euphonics, had in the song was Asemi Dika, and I was like, this is exactly what I want. Because someone has to say certain things, and it's important. If we don't say those things, who's going to say them? Right? So it's important that I make mention of the fact that euphonics, they have set the pace for me to say that which has to be said. It's also important. Yeah. It's also important for us to understand that to say that which has to be said requires a lot of courage. And that courage must also be seen as part of the things that a real education should bequeath to us. Because if education cannot make you courageous, then what is that education for? The Greeks refer to it as parrhesia, asemi dika. And also, when you break it down to English, it's enunciating the truth. And that is what you lawyers are supposed to do, to enunciate the truth. And in your anthem, you said 3 things that I took: service, honesty, and justice. These are very important. For you to enunciate the truth, you must carry these principles with you, with no fear. And the truth is that which is consistent. It is that which is consistent with fact and evidence. That which is not consistent with fact and evidence cannot be the truth. So we're here to talk about certain things within the system that we refer to as education. You refer to it as martyrs arising. These martyrs are many. They have been with us for many years. But there are some that are just, close to us in terms of time frame. One is a certain kind of discrimination against some people who do not appear to conform to a certain standard of grooming. And the question is, who set these standards of grooming? For us to understand this, it's important for us to understand the history of the educational system that we have in this country. Another matter that I would like to touch on is not just, it's about quality education and the real meaning of education, trying to get us to think whether what we refer to as education is the same as schooling. Perhaps we have been talking about schooling and thinking that schooling is education, but maybe we are wrong. And so what I intend to do is to go through a certain historical sketch to get us to understand what we refer to today as education, where it came from and its ideology, and also to help you to understand what education is when we get into our own indigenous knowledge systems. And with that understanding, we can appreciate why some things perhaps are not running on the lines of justice within what we now refer to education, which to me is schooling. So I will start by asking you to think about the indigenous terrain, and if you can come up with a certain imagination, or even if you know, if there existed anything called education. Yes, all the ethnic groups in Ghana, in Africa, had education. And this education existed before the intrusion of Arab imperialism, which came to plant Islam and Arab culture on the African terrain, and before the intrusion of European imperialism, cultural imperialism and colonialization, which also came to plant Christianity, Eurocentric Christianity, and what you refer to as formal classroom schooling, erroneously referred to as education. That education which existed on the indigenous terrain was a right. It had to be, it was for all. It was egalitarian in its orientation. It was a right to make a person to become something within society. I'll talk about that thing. The Akan word for education is entity. It's entity. The Fanti will also say entity. And what is entity? You have a root word to anciency. Ancient, tete. It is that system which gives to you the wisdom, the knowledge, the skills of your ancestors. Those skills and wisdom that they used to live together and also to basically live at peace with the environment. These were what every human being had to get in the African indigenous community. We can also say that entity refers to inoculation, to tete someone. Inoculate, in other words, put something into a person that which will make that person become strong to false ideas, to false notions, to make that person strong to build a society. That is entity. To make the person have right knowledge, right thought, have a well-view that is in consonant to the aspirations of the society. No one was excluded. No one was excluded. It was a right. It didn't discriminate against gender, sex, age. It was for young ones, but also for adults. It was also lifelong. Using in the English words informal and formal, I would say that there existed informal and formal types. You had education being given in the home. The household was the first place of learning. The family played an important part, and also the village played an important part. And that's why we have the maxim or the wise saying that it takes a village to raise a child, or it takes a village to raise a person. It wasn't about, going into a certain kind of classroom where foreign ideas were given to you. But we'll come to that. To make a person to be wise and knowledgeable, the person had to receive entity, skillful in technology, science, and spiritual understanding of the cosmos, to become a holistic person who was in tune with the laws of the land, the imbra of the land. The laws of the land. And note that laws or imbra is also in Akan or Infanti is synonymous with culture. Amambra and imbra, the same. So for you to understand the laws, so whose laws, for example, are you studying as law students? And if you pursue a certain law, it means that you're also pursuing a certain culture. Have you ever asked yourself why, for example, we are in a post-colonial society to study laws that will be beneficial to us? We have international law, understand the laws of other people. But what about your own indigenous laws? Have you ever asked yourself why you still have to wear wigs? I told you that we're going to talk about some serious issues. But that's what education is about, the courage. parrhesia, enunciating truth. Your ancestors were not wearing wigs. What kind of wigs are you even wearing? Your own hair? Now, these are questions they need to ask. So to understand, you had to understand the laws of your land and the rituals of the land, and the history and the deep thought or deep thinking process, what the Greeks referred to as philosophia, philosophy, deep thinking, relating to ethics, logic, epistemology. And you also had to acquire the skill of numeracy, or the knowledge of numeracy, how to play with words, with numbers. The education in the indigenous setting, taught at home and also the wider village, was also to make you make intelligent choices using the law of dialectics, the law of cause and effect. That is it. Life, the keys to life is the law of cause, understanding the law of cause and effect. The law of dialectics and the law of fractals. That everything you have, all the things in the world are interconnected in a fractal manner. And dialectics that whatever I do, what you refer to as karma, whatever I do, this is it. So if I do not give good education or good schooling to children and allow them to stay under trees, what will be the effect? Basic cause and effect. If we say we live in a society that is secular, a secular republic, that is not atheistic, it is theistic, but it is not religious. And we want to discriminate against some people because we reset some, spiritual actions on their part and they don't look like us, so we discriminate against them. What do you think will happen eventually? There will be an effect, perhaps out of frustration, knowing that the constitution of the land permits us to have certain rights that are common to us. There will be a reaction. The reaction may not be beautiful. That's why you have in certain spaces, you have people calling them religious fanatics, religious terrorists, and so on and so forth. What are they fighting against? I know that at times there is some kind of madness, but at times they have genuine reasons because the laws fail them, the constitution fails them, so they decide to fight for themselves. So it's important for us to understand that these were some of the things that our educational system taught. And common sense. Common sense is the sense of good judgment. Common sense is the sense of good judgment. Being wise, learning from adults and peers for life skills, learning among ourselves. Oral transmission of knowledge given. Knowledge and wisdom hidden in proverbs, songs, etc. Symbols, ideograms. These were used to teach people, to educate people. You had experiential and experimental knowledge acquired through action and physical work. So you had to work. You had to be on the farm. You had to follow your father to hunt. You had to follow your mother. You had to be with your friends, play in the field, learn from them, experience, and also to learn some skills like fishing, blacksmithing, medicine, which you could use for self-edification. You could use to support yourself, or you could create professions out of them. It was offering right knowledge for power. That's indigenous education. It was about the human being knowing the self and its place in the wider community to help build and sustain it. That is education. That's entity. Creating it and sustaining it for posterity, just as the ancients sustained it for you. This was the situation in the prehistorical period. But then you had foreign influences coming in. The first foreign influence was from the Muslims. I wouldn't call it the Muslims. Came from the Arabs. But the Arabs carried with them a certain cultural package which is referred to as Islam, creating people who became neo-Arabs called Muslims. To a very large extent, that's the truth. To be a Muslim, you must study Arabic, for example. You must at least know how to speak some Arabic. What is that? That's not anything that you would say came out of a vacuum. It came out of a certain cultural space. So you are becoming somehow Arabized. You carry names that are Islamic, but they are not Islamic, they are actually Arabic. The name Muhammad, for example, existed before Islam was created. So it cannot be Islamic. It's an Arabic name. You had to dress in a certain way. And when you dress them, you dress like that, you say, I'm Muslim. No, you are dressed like an Arab. So these came in, and they also had a certain kind of education. But maybe you have to look at that and say, was that in consonance with indigenous terrain, indigenous idea of education? It was to create Muslims that would support the Ummah, which is the Muslim global community. This was part, and it came to stay. You have masjids, you have the makarantas today in our space. Well, that wasn't all. You had another kind of a, system coming in, which came from Europe, right? And that was on the wings of European imperialism. Note that imperialism is not something that is kind. Imperialism is not something that is benign. Imperialism and colonialism are things that are ideas that are meant to shape space in one's interest. And so, I used to read certain textbooks, and they used to ask the children, please show some advantages of colonialism. I mean, what advantages, for example, can colonialism be advantageous? I know there are certain questions that will be asked, but we'll get there. No, cannot be advantageous. The education, so-called education, what Kataji would say in the United States referred to as miseducation of the Negro, here, the black person or the African, was primarily to create a group of people that will be easily, or that the imperialist agent could easily manipulate and also use to support the imperial agenda, or colonial agenda. That school, that system came to be built in schools, or it manifested in schools, places where you were kept. Boarding houses were created. Why were the boarding houses created, for example? To basically take the person out of his environment and his society and put him in a place where high and huge doses of Eurocentric education will be given to that person. That was the idea. So you should understand what it was about. And in there, certain disciplines were taught. Maths, English, French. In some societies, you had to study French. If you couldn't study or you couldn't speak it, you had some trouble. Indigenous medicine, indigenous knowledge systems were taken away. So another kind of worldview was being given to the colonized, to create imperial machines that will work for the exploitation agenda of the European colonial and imperial nations. Castle schools were created, and mission schools were created, and a selected few were made to go there to start the process. Often children that were produced between, conjugal relations between European agents and Africans were first privileged to go into these schools, and later they started spreading it. What was the place of the female in it? Now we start with some of the inequalities and also the problems that we're still facing today. Just some time ago, about some years ago, there was this anthem: send your girl child to school, send your girl child to school, send your girl child to school. Now let's go back to the prehistoric period and look at the prehistoric indigenous African education. Egalitarian, women and females had education. They were not discriminated against. However, when the European colonial system came, it said females were to be taken out of the educational system. It was for boys. So the question is, provenance, when we talk about the origin, the provenance, the genesis of this discrimination, where did this start from? The men had to go to the schools, the females had to stay at home. It was later that they started to allow some females to go to school. And because it became a colonial hangover, during the post-colonial period, it was still difficult for parents to send their female children to school. It was a boys' affair, male affair. Today, I don't know how many females are in school, but it seems that we're getting a certain high level of, in terms of numbers, we're getting females. But it was that kind of discrimination was created or brought to our shores by the imperial system or the imperialists. We have taken this system that I refer to as education, school system, and through different governments, basic school system, we've been experimenting with the tertiary school system and even adult education, starting from the First Republic, Kwame Nkrumah tried to build more systems, to get children to go and study. But you had the first attempt to decolonize this educational system, to make it egalitarian again with Kwame Nkrumah starting. Decolonizing it, to decolonize the curriculum, decolonize the system, decolonize the intake. Giving even ideological education. Kwame Nkrumah started with that, the First Republic. Creating the young pioneers, for example, the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute. Making education to become intellectual and utilitarian at the same time. To create a new African that will move away from colonial mentality, because that was still there. So you look at the First Republic, that's what Kwame Nkrumah decided to do. But unfortunately, that experiment was curtailed as Nkrumah's government was removed. Other governments came and they all tried. What we have to understand is that all the governments that have come after Kwame Nkrumah have in one way or the other, experimented with creating a kind of educational system that will be free, fair, and egalitarian. The 1992 Constitution of Ghana, for example, see, I'm not a lawyer, so I will not really go into the legal details of it because I know you have a lot of lawyers here, but I will still talk. All what I want to say is that the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, in strong terms, protect human rights and also of which education is part. And if you look at it specifically, it guarantees the right to education, right? Education, as we have come to understand it, schooling. That's what we know, that schooling, going to school, protects the right to education. And not just giving them, those who are supposed to have that right, the knowledge within that system, but also to give them quality. So if you have that which is not of quality, then it's a problem, it's an issue, it's a matter, and that's what we need to be talking also about, not just the discrimination. Quality education. It is constitutional. You don't need to study quantum theory or rocket science to know that studying under tree is not quality. We live in a country or we live in a continent that is
naturally endowed with resources. So if you say that you want to allow children to have education which is constitutional, and they are studying under trees, then you are actually not giving them education. And that is wrong. So we have that as a problem. It is one of the matters that we need to talk about. Why is it so? Perhaps some people are able to access quality education equal to international standards, and so they don't care, and they can give same to their children and their relatives, and don't care about other people. And if you think what I'm saying is something that is sensitive and I shouldn't say it, then you haven't got real education. Because you must have the courage to say it without sounding political, but just being a person who enunciates truth. A person who has entertained. A person who loves his or her people. The Constitution is not the only space where you find this right being guaranteed to all. You also have the Education Act of 2008, and that Education Act also guarantees the right to education in Ghana. It consolidates the law relating to children by providing for the rights of the child, maintenance and adoption, and regulating child labor, apprenticeship, and related matters. Also strongly supporting education, giving the child or the person, because the child is a person in society, the right to education. Some choose to trample on the right to education, other people's right to education. Why is it so? Because of that colonial hangover, because of their orientation to certain worldviews, because of their religious beliefs and inclinations. And that is, for example, one of the issues that you came to me and we should talk about, the issue of the head. It seems to me that there is an unsaid conviction, but not articulate. Notion, some people even say that Ghana is a Christian country. You are the lawyer. I think Ghana is not a Christian country. When you say God bless our homeland Ghana, some people say, you see that says that Ghana is a Christian country. No. God is not. God is an idea. Some people consider money as God. Others consider, cars as God, husbands as God, wives as goddesses. So God bless our homeland Ghana. Are we talking about your husband? God is not a monopoly of Christianity. So if the God bless our homeland Ghana, you say that makes it a Christian country. You can also be talking about the Muslims saying that that's Allah. Or the Hindus saying that that is Brahman. So we need to understand that it is not. And because this false notion that has not been spoken at times is, people articulate it, but you find certain people occupying high positions not saying these things. When you want to access, for example, education, and that's exactly what has been happening in some of the secondary schools. The Achimota incident is not the first. It has always happened. I had to speak for one student here, even in our own university, at Lecturer-Prof. This is the high school. This lady had admission, had a chick. She went there. They didn't know her, so they didn't know her feet. They gave her everything. When she got there, they said, you have locks. You need to go and cut it. Now, the question is why? Why? First, they say that there are certain rules in the school, right? But the question is, find the origin or the genesis or the provenance of these rules, and you know that they are not rules created by our own culture. They were created by the colonial system. The colonial system, whether in the military, whether in the school system, whether in the civil service, created a certain standard of grooming for the colonized to cut the hair. And to cut the hair was to dehumanize and to make you know that there is a higher power. It cut across all the colonial areas. In North America, the Europeans went there and they had to deal with the indigenous people, the people you refer to as Red Indians, as the Native Americans. They loved to carry long hair, very long hair. They would get the children and cut their hair. First to cut them away from their culture and self, and also to help make them to understand there was a higher power. If you go to Australia, they did the same with Aborigines. In Africa, there was the same. That grooming was a way of controlling. And we have taken it. So when we go and they say that, oh, you have long hair, but we have to find out that these rules are colonial. And are these rules, right, superior to the Constitution? Are these rules superior to the Constitution? No. So that is number one, the colonial hangover. And this is what we refer to as coloniality. When colonialism is no longer there, we say colonization, colonialism, and coloniality. Coloniality means colonial mentality. When it is gone and people are still perpetuating their unjust systems, the dehumanizing systems, the anti-cultural systems. So you have that at the back of the minds of many of these people who occupy offices of education. So you can't be here. Why? Now when I look at those people, for example, sitting there, many of them are wearing other people's hair. And you say rules. Rules because you are wearing your colonizer's hair. I don't mind if you wear it and you do not. You want to wear it, fine. But why do you want to trample on the rights of another person who is wearing his or her hair? That is the problem. The second thing is that another undercurrent, or a second undercurrent, is this religious position that many people have. As I said, unspoken, you'll find it. That this is the kind of hair that the Abosomfo wear, and so on and so forth. This is African, real African culture, you know. The same thing happened. The missionaries were cutting hair. They didn't want people to identify or have things symbolizing their cultural orientation and their spiritual belief systems. So today, many of our office holders who subscribe to a certain religious idea, especially Christianity, do find it a little bit uncomfortable dealing with people who carry certain looks that are considered, you know, very indigenous and on the other side of the divide. It is important for us to understand that whether you are Christian or Muslim or Buddhist, or you believe in colonialism or want to still hold on to the colonial mentality, we live in a country that is secular, as a republic. And there are some rights enshrined in the Constitution. Education is number one, and we do not have any right to trample on this particular sacred right. We should focus on a school system that will be an open space for people to come and acquire knowledge and shape themselves, and for those people to be judged based on the content of their character, and not the way they look. And as children, they go like, well, he's a child, he cannot carry locks. Now the child is coming to the school under the aegis or umbrella or the protection of a ward, or of a guardian, or of a father or a mother. And if you say the child is a minor, you have to go to that parent and ask him, is the child just being a fashionista? Is the child just being rebellious? Or is this child having locks? Or this child having locks because there is something cultural that you uphold in your family? Ask the parents. That will be the way to go. If the parent tells you, we don't know anything about this, then you know that, okay, you need to go. But if the parent says, for example, yes, this is in line with what we uphold in our homes, as long as it is not dangerous to the health of other students, then why do you, or other people, then why do you fight against it? The question is, for example, how will someone's hair interfere in his or her quest for knowledge? How will it, can you prove it? You cannot. But the question that other people have asked is, what if other people decide to come into these spaces of what you call education with other things like we don't wear shoes and so on and so forth? Steady, for example, if that person says that he or she is following a certain spiritual system and that system does not permit him or wear shoes, I would like to take that person to the United States of America and ask that person to walk to school when it is snowing. Then you say, my spiritual system doesn't permit me to walk, but ask that person to walk to school when it is cold and snowing without shoes. The person will wear shoes. So you see, it will go against the health of the person if the person decides to go to school barefooted. So you can go like, well, with this one, you know that it can be harmful to your health. So the application of common sense is important, and I'm so happy that, you know, because we are using the Ashmota case as an example, what you enunciated, honesty and justice, you know, in fact came to play. And I'm not saying this as a triumph because maybe I have locks. No, I was happy because a fundamental human right was upheld, a constitutional right was upheld. And that is what we need to pursue. That regardless of what other people will say, regardless of what my church will say, regardless of what my temple will say, regardless of what my friends will say, it is always important for us to pursue that which is true and that which is legal and legitimate. That which goes against these things must be shunned. As I said, we live in a republic, a secular republic. Our educational system should promote a humanist education. A humanist education. And that's why I think it's another matter that we send our children to public schools where we have the taxpayers' money running these schools. And our children, or the person who is sent there, is subjected to rituals that belong to other religions. You have to be at assembly or you have to attend worship or so on and so forth, and you are made to go through a certain ritual that is religious. When we started this session, I I observed something. I think it's colonial hangover. We started with a prayer. And the prayer was not a Buddhist prayer. It wasn't a Hindu prayer. It wasn't a Muslim prayer. It was a Christian prayer. It ended in the name of Jesus. So you can not tell me that it is not a Christian prayer. Is that justice? Is that respect? Is that something that is in line with the sacred republican principles of our country? I think it's important for us to know that, as Emperor Haile Selassie said, that religion is personal, but the state is for all. And so humanist principles have to reign. And we can tell our children to schools where I'm a taxpayer and I'm not a Christian and my child is being made to compulsorily attend what is referred to as worship. And you know why? Because for a very long time, occupants of the offices, high offices of these secular public schools have been people with certain religious orientations. And as persons, they try to impose their religious belief systems on the public space. Imagine a Muslim running a public school and he says, because it's my tenure, we are going to have Friday worship. And all of you are going to come here and we're going to sing Muslim songs. We're going to go to Muslim rituals. What will happen? These are the martyrs. And because these have existed for a very long time, I did not find it difficult to understand why Achimota behaved the way he behaved. So it's important for all of us to understand that as legal brains and as people, because in your law courts, you are made to preach. You are made, you are taught to be kind, not to miscarry judgment. It's important for us all to respect the sacred republican status of our country and to see each person as a citizen and not a subject. A citizen, not a subject, a citizen of the Kiwi, a citizen of the police, a citizen of the state, a citizen of the town, a citizen of the city. As long as we do that, we will treat each other with humanist principles. Even though we may be people with different belief systems, when we enter the public space, the republican space, the res publica, rule of the people, that which belongs to all of us, we will raise the banner of the Constitution and the human rights and not be dishonest to ourselves by imposing our belief systems on other people. Because at the point in time, perhaps, maybe we have some positions. The martyrs are rising. Talk again. Quality or no quality education. So you don't need don't need the special education or special training to see that we need quality education. Number two, certain officers in our educational system are still suffering from colonial hangover, where people in position are bringing on board their religious belief systems, their colonial worldview, and using that as a yardstick to measure how far a person can step into their domain of education or schools. And these must be dealt with. I'm happy that we have been able to have a first ruling on a case, one of such cases of discrimination against the her. And it came from a lady, I've forgotten her name. But as we say, I big her up for what she has done. It's not a triumph for Rastafari, it's a triumph for Ghanaians. I think that as lawyers, you have to continue to pursue truth, equality, justice. Not just pursue them and internalize them, but also to manifest them in the work that you do. Thank you all for listening.
So, about colonization and imperialism, I want to have your thought on LGBT. It's not our culture, and it's something that some people in Parliament are proposing that we should criminalize it. So I want to have your take on it. What do you think?
I'm Latif Lawrence. My question is to Prof. One of the supporters of the ruling that supported the Rastafarian community, because I felt it was a win for all minority groups and religious bodies. But Prof, our country is a secular state, and that would mean there is no dominance and priority given to a certain religion, and all religions are accepted. Would you therefore advocate that we undo all religious practices in our public space, since we do not categorically endorse a single religion as ours as a nation, and therefore in public spaces we do not have any system of religion, because anytime that we practice, it would be one religion over the other. Would you therefore advocate that we undo such practices in public spaces? Thank you.
I'm called Farid. I wanted to ask, towards the end of the lecture, you kind of advocated for a humanist maybe type of schooling. I wanted to ask you, from your point of view, which of the humanist branches should be implemented in our schools? Because I'm privy to some of the branches of humanism. So which of them particularly are you saying that should be implemented? Thank you.
So I would like to start with the last question, the humanist principles. I'm not subscribing to any of the branches. I'm basically saying that fundamental to the humanist approach to understanding the world, the human should be central. Common sense should be, or reason should be king, without invoking any transcendental power or spiritual power into the space of human relations. One can do that within, I don't want to use subaltern spaces, but in the personal corridors of existence and not the public corridors of existence. Humanist principles also promote the application of science and technology, and so these must be at the forefront of our nation-building efforts. So I just want to say that taking a cue even from that word humanist, I want to say that place the human at the center, without necessarily delving into the interpretations that people have given to this kind of centering, or how to center the human. The second question is secular state. Indeed, it is a secular state. And will I therefore advocate the removal of religions, religious spectacles or demonstrations in public spaces? Of course. No two ways about that. I will say yes, we need to get them out. Because you hinted that we are a nation made up of people, as Dr. Kwesi Sapon said and wrote in his book, people, we have different spiritual belief systems and religions. That should be considered as a private, personal thing. But when we get into the public space, we don't need to have these religious, demonstrations. As a country, we do not need to endorse, we don't have to endorse one religion, a religion of the Republic of Ghana. No, it shouldn't happen. It will be discriminatory. It will be anti the indigenous worldviews of the people of this country. I was having a conversation with the Nigerian professor once, and we were talking about the pluralist, inclusivist, exclusivist, orientations of some religious groups. And we decided to talk about the African culture, indigenous spiritual systems, and realized that it's all embracing. The space